excuse me, regarding Venezuela. The president said yesterday that Secretary Hegseth had denied that second strike, that reported second strike on an alleged drug vote on September 2nd. The secretary said to the president that didn't happen. But to clarify, I just wanted you to clear this up. In his social media post, Secretary Hegseth didn't go into details about that strike. He just said U.S. operations in the area were lawful, and he said that the story and media reports were fabricated. So to be clear, does the administration deny that second strike happened, or did it happen and the administration denies that Secretary Hegseth gave the order?
The latter is true, Abe, and I have a statement to read for you here. President Trump and Secretary Hegseth have made it clear that presidentially designated narco-terrorist groups are subject to lethal targeting in accordance with the laws of war. With respect to the strikes in question on September 2nd, Secretary Hegseth authorized Admiral Bradley to conduct these kinetic strikes. Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law, directing the engagement to ensure the boat was destroyed and the threat to the United States of America was eliminated. And I would just add one more point to remind the American public why these lethal strikes are taking place. Because this administration has designated these narco-terrorists as foreign terrorist organizations. The president has a right to take them out if they are threatening the United States of America and if they are bringing illegal narcotics that are killing our citizens at a record rate, which is what they are doing. And under the previous administration, there was enough fentanyl trafficked into our country to kill every American man, woman, and child many times over. And so that's why you've seen a drastic difference in this administration's policy with respect to the last, and it's one of the many reasons the American public re-elected this president and support this Secretary of War in conducting these strikes.
So to be clear, to clarify, Admiral Bradley was the one who gave that order for a second strike.
And he was well within his authority to do so.
So just to be clear, to clarify on Jackie and Gabe, did Admiral Bradley order that second strike because there were still survivors after the initial strike?
Again, as I read for you, Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law. He directed the engagement to ensure the boat was destroyed and the threat of narco-terrorists to the United States was completely eliminated.
So was the initial order from Secretary Hegseth, everyone be killed, and did that come from President Trump?
I saw that quoted in a Washington Post story. I would reject that the Secretary of War ever said that. However, the president has made it quite clear that if narco-terrorists, again, are trafficking illegal drugs towards the United States, he has the authority to kill them. And that's what this administration is doing. Go ahead. Sure.
And then in the interest of transparency, does the White House support releasing the Department of Defense's video of those September 2nd strikes on those military boats? And also, separate topic on presidential pardon power. Why did the president commute the sentence of David Gentile recently? He was a private equity executive. He served 12 days out of a 7-year sentence. Prosecutors said he defrauded $1.6 billion with thousands of victims, including veterans, farmers, teachers. Why was he pardoned?
To your first question, that's definitely not a decision for me to make. I would defer you to the Department of War. It's also probably a decision for the president himself to make. As for your second question with respect to that pardon, he issued a commutation for Mr. Gentile, who's the former CEO and co-founder of GBP Capital Holdings. Unlike similar companies, GBP paid regular annualized distributions to its investors. In 2015, GBP disclosed to investors the possibility of using investor capital to pay some of these distributions rather than funding them from current operations. Even though this was disclosed to investors, the Biden Department of Justice claimed it was a Ponzi scheme. This claim was profoundly undercut by the fact that GBP had explicitly told investors what would happen. At trial, the government was unable to tie any supposedly fraudulent representations to Mr. Gentile. In short, again, this is another example that has been brought to the president's attention of a weaponization of justice from the previous administration, and therefore he signed this commutation.
Statements, though, say that these people were defrauded.
I just read you a very detailed summary of why the commutation was made.
You said that second strike was in full accordance with the law of armed conflict, but the Navy's own manual of law of war says that specifically firing on survivors from a wrecked vessel is an example of a war crime that's forbidden under U.S. law and the law of armed conflict. So how was that second strike in following law of armed conflict, and then second on immigration.
Again, Andrew, I would reiterate to you the strike was conducted in international waters and in accordance with the law of armed conflict. And since somebody asked about Congress, and it's sort of related to Venezuela, I also want to add that Secretary Hegseth spoke with members of Congress who may have expressed some concerns over the weekend. And there have also been 13 bipartisan briefings to Congress on the Venezuelan strikes. There have been a number of document reviews for members of Congress to review the classified DOJ Office of Legal Counsel opinion and other related documents. 29 senators and 92 representatives have reviewed those documents, which is about 2/3 of those are Democrat members, and they have been made available to all 100 senators, all 435 members of the House, and to general counsels of the relevant committees on a bipartisan basis for their review.
Why won't the administration either confirm or deny or reveal whether or not there were survivors after that initial first strike? And what imminent threat would two survivors pose who were clinging presumably to the wreckage of that boat?
Again, as I said, I think you guys are sort of not listening fully to the statement I've provided. Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law, directing the engagement to ensure the boat was totally destroyed and the threat to the narco-terrorists, to the United States, was eliminated. And for any further questions about his thinking, I would defer you to the Department of War. I obviously wasn't in the room for these
Just to follow up, Karoline, just on the administration's policy when it comes to survivors, was there a change in policy after this strike on September 2nd? The Washington Post is reporting that these two survivors were killed after a second strike, but then in October, two people were rescued and returned to Colombia and Ecuador. So was there a decision that was made to handle survivors differently after these strikes?
Not to my knowledge, no.